Hey, I'm Sandy Guard. Welcome to part 3 of this Setting Boundaries workshop. Part 1 and part 2 are already posted on YouTube, so if you haven't checked those out yet, you can search for those. So we're going to get into it. I am inspired to do this work because of my work in the addictions recovery field. It's certainly a common topic with people I work with, so I'm hoping it's of use for everyone in the general public, really. And if you're interested in exploring my services, you can go to ggirllifestyle.com. I work with people who are just starting to explore change in terms of substance use, maybe a harm reduction approach, right straight through to people who have long-term abstinence. So check me out if you want to do so. So here we go, setting boundaries. So today it's about tuning into our feelings, thoughts, considering getting help from our friends, our trusted friends in setting boundaries. That may be helpful if they're good at setting boundaries. Discerning what's important to you and getting clear about any barriers that may have been holding you back from setting boundaries in the past. So to set healthy boundaries, we first need to identify what they are. I will share 5 ways to improve clarity surrounding our boundaries, including accessing our feelings, self-reflection, consulting others, knowing our values, and understanding what's holding us back. So first, we're going to tune into our feelings. Being in touch with our feelings is an essential step in setting boundaries. We are commonly conditioned throughout our lives to ignore feelings that are unwanted or inconvenient. This conditioning makes it challenging to recognize when our bodies are trying to tell us we are unsafe. There are a couple of strategies that we can employ to help us recognize when our internal selves are speaking and identifying what our internal selves are trying to communicate to us. So this first part is around mindful awareness. It's the practice of paying attention to your thoughts and feelings in an open-hearted, non-judgmental, and non-reactive way. Practicing mindful awareness can help us learn to recognize the bodily sensations associated with our emotions without trying to escape or suppress them. For example, you might notice that your muscles are often tense or that you have this sickly, fluttering feeling of anxiety in your stomach after spending time with a particular person. These bodily sensations, which may otherwise be easily overlooked or ignored, are informative that a boundary may be needed with a person. Talking about our feelings has long been observed to help us understand and manage them. Neuroscience research has revealed that putting your feelings into words produces a calming effect. Using brain scan technology, this calming effect has been observed as changes in activity in a brain region known to be involved in feelings of fear and anxiety. The stress reduction brought about by naming our emotions can help us process and respond to them rather than becoming overwhelmed by them and reacting in ways that are counterproductive. Name it to tame it is a technique that involves noticing and labeling your feelings as you're experiencing them. Learning to recognize and label our emotions will be helpful for sorting out what boundaries are needed and will facilitate our ability to clearly communicate them to others. So this exercise is called What's That Feeling? There's going to be a couple slides related to this exercise. So we're going to be considering which emotions do we experience most frequently? Which of the feelings that you'll see listed are you most inclined to suppress or reject? And then picking 3 emotions that you commonly experience and discerning how those emotions feel in your body. So here we go, getting clear on what's that feeling. So happiness is an emotional state characterized by feelings of joy, contentment, and satisfaction, often accompanied by a sense of well-being, positivity, and a desire to share one's happiness with others. Sadness is an emotional state characterized by feelings of grief, loss, or disappointment, and often accompanied by a sense of emptiness, low mood, and a lack of motivation or energy. Anger is an emotional state characterized by feelings of frustration, irritation, or hostility, often accompanied by physical sensations such as increased heart rate, muscle tension, and a desire to express one's anger in some way. Fear shows up as feelings of apprehension, anxiety, or terror, and may be accompanied by physical sensations of increased heart rate, sweating, and a sense of impending danger or threat. Surprise is characterized by feelings of astonishment or disbelief and often accompanied by a physical sensation such as widening of the eyes, quickening of the breath, and a sense of uncertainty or confusion. Disgust may be characterized by feelings of revulsion or distaste and may be showing up in our bodies as nausea, retching, or maybe as avoidance behaviors. So this slide really does the deep dive on all the emotions that we just discussed on the previous slide. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but it may be a good place to pause and take a good look at these emotions and just to see what comes up for you most often. Are there any surprises here? For example, I can be impatient at times. Doesn't always feel to me like I'm angry, but there is an underlying expression of anger with impatience. So it's something, this practice can help us reflect on how we're feeling. And how we're feeling is going to bridge into setting boundaries. Now we're moving on to reflecting on your thoughts. Just as being aware of how we're feeling is an important component to identifying and setting healthy boundaries, so is being aware of our thoughts. For instance, you may notice that your inner critic gets particularly loud and mean after spending time with a friend. Reflecting on the relationship between time with your friend and lower self-esteem might inform you that your friend has too much control over what you think about yourself. Reflecting on this may help you decide to set some emotional or temporal boundaries with them. So in previous modules, we discussed the different types of boundaries. So if you haven't watched the first two modules, you may want to go back and find those on YouTube. Self-reflection can help reveal other patterns of thought that influence our willingness and ability to set boundaries. Gaslighting and cognitive distortions are two of the most common and most nefarious patterns of thought. Gaslighting is a recently popularized term that's defined as a conscious or unconscious form of psychological abuse that occurs when a perpetrator distorts information and confuses a victim, triggering the victim to doubt their memory and sanity. In the context of setting boundaries, gaslighting might manifest as someone making you feel like you're doing something wrong by setting boundaries with them, or that your boundaries are unfair in some way. Gaslighting can occur both interpersonally between individuals and intrapersonally within yourself. When you gaslight yourself, you are both the victim and the perpetrator. For example, you might be gaslighting yourself when you tell yourself things like, "You're overreacting. It wasn't that bad. I'm probably just crazy." Or, "Setting a boundary is selfish." Or, how about this one? "No one will like you anymore if you start setting boundaries." Do you tell yourself any of those things? Reflecting on our thoughts can help us recognize when this voice is present and allow us to amplify the voice that says, instead, "Your needs are valid and you deserve to feel safe." Cognitive distortions, on the other hand, can be thought of as exaggerated patterns of thought that aren't based in reality and lead you to believe negative things about yourself. They are essentially the funhouse mirror of your mind, exaggerating and minimizing different parts of your experience, resulting in something extremely unflattering and out of keeping with reality. In addition to being detrimental to a healthy self-esteem, cognitive distortions cloud the truth about who we are and how we interact with our environment. Without a solid understanding of our reality, our boundaries will be unstable and may crumble more easily under pressure. Let's talk about a few of the 15 common cognitive distortions that might set us back in a boundary setting expedition. So we're just going to cover a few of those. Mind reading. Mind reading refers to the assumption that you know what someone else is thinking. This cognitive distortion can be especially dangerous when it comes to boundaries because you may assume another person knows what your boundaries are when in reality they don't. Catastrophizing. This is when you assume the worst case scenarios, assuming that they're going to happen. Catastrophizing can make setting boundaries challenging because you may be inclined to believe that the person you're setting boundaries with will respond in the worst possible way. Assuming that someone will be angry at you or otherwise behave negatively towards you if you set a boundary can definitely be a substantial deterrent. Overgeneralization. This involves the automatic belief that a single event is an invariable rule. It's often identifiable by the words such as always and never. For example, you misplace your keys one evening and say, "Oh, I always lose things." Overgeneralization can lead to boundaries that are unrealistically strict or rigid. In other words, if you overgeneralize, you may build walls rather than set boundaries. Remember, healthy boundaries should be flexible and context dependent. Jumping to conclusion. This refers to interpreting an event in a negative light without the evidence to support your conclusion. For example, when a friend doesn't text you back right away and you assume that means they're angry with you. Jumping to conclusions can lead to an unjustly negative and inaccurate picture of reality, adding further challenge to identifying where you need to work on your boundaries. Jumping to conclusions can also create the sense that people are intentionally crossing your boundaries and disrespecting you when this isn't the case at all. As we're beginning to identify and set boundaries, there's going to be a learning period for the people around us. If we want to keep our boundaries and our relationships, it's important to assume ignorance before we assume malice on their part. In other words, we should give people the benefit of the doubt. Reflect on your thoughts. Reflecting on our thoughts can help us get to know ourselves better and improve the accuracy of our self-perception. The self-knowledge we can gain from reflection will give us a clearer picture of our preferences, needs, goals, and abilities. An accurate and unambiguous perspective of who we are will not only help us set healthy boundaries, but will help us maintain them in the face of pushback from others. So we're going to explore the potential to phone a friend and get some insight from them in helping us set our boundaries. When we're in the early stages of exploring our boundaries and identifying where we might need them, talking about boundaries with our trusted friends can be immensely valuable. Let's explore a few of the questions we can ask our friends that will help us with our boundaries. So you could ask, where do you think I lack boundaries? Well, it takes a lot of vulnerability to do that, of course. But however, we're going to explore this. Though we have privileged insight into how we think and feel, what we want, and what we care about, there are aspects of ourselves that others are in a better position to notice. The blind spots we have when it comes to seeing our full self can be both intentional and unintentional. That is, we may purposefully ignore or reject aspects of our behaviors, or we may simply not be able to see them. Asking the people that know us well and want the best for us can help illuminate these blind spots and improve our self-knowledge. So you could ask, what kind of boundaries do you have? If we're new to setting boundaries and we're not sure where to start, asking others about the boundaries that they keep can be a great first step. When we listen to our friends talk about their boundaries, we're given the opportunity to investigate what comes up for us internally. The point is not necessarily to just pick boundaries that we think we should have, but also to listen to what their needs and expectations were in the situations they describe, and consider how we might best meet similar needs in our lives. You could also ask, what has your experience with setting boundaries been like? There's no way around it. Setting boundaries is uncomfortable. This is especially true if we're new to the practice. Talking to our friends about their experiences may give us some valuable strategies for managing the discomfort or responding to resistors, those that push back. And it may also let us know that we're not alone and that the discomfort is normal and it's not a sign that we're doing something wrong. So let's explore what's important to you. Considering what our priorities are is essential for identifying where we need to set boundaries. That is, when we know what's important to us, we can set boundaries that facilitate those things. For example, if traveling is important to you, you may need to set boundaries around how you spend your money. Similarly, if time with your family is important, you may need to set some boundaries around how you spend your time in other areas of your life to ensure there's enough time left for the people that matter to you the most. All too often, the important things get lost and deprioritized without us realizing it. We can better identify where we want to set boundaries and how we want them to shape our lives when we reconnect with our priorities. So let's walk through a few questions we can ask ourselves as we reconnect with and reaffirm our priorities. So what are the meaningful areas of your life in order of importance? We often want to do it all. We want to be superhuman, to excel in every role in every area of our lives and still maintain our health and our sanity. Though that's a noble pursuit, the truth is we're human and we have to live with the same constraints on our time and energy as other humans. To guard against spreading ourselves too thin and setting ourselves up for disappointment, it's helpful to focus on the meaningful areas of our lives that we rank towards the top of our importance list. Below are a few examples that you might include in your list. I think it's important to have a boundary in making your list in terms of what's important to you, not what other people would have put on your list for you, whether that's family or what have you, right? So, what would you include in your list? Perhaps family, physical strength, home, wealth, friends, skill, leisure, profession, partnership, spirituality, autonomy, fun, health, sexuality, travel, identity. So you're being asked here to discern your top 3 in an order of importance for you. And you're going to work with your boundary setting, kind of launching off from here. We've explored a few different areas of importance for boundary setting. So if relationships are high on your list, it's helpful to identify which relationships mean the most to you so that you know which relationships should be prioritized as you're working on your boundaries. That is, these are the people for which you might want to invest the most time and energy in clearly communicating your boundaries, because clear boundaries strengthen healthy relationships. So what do you enjoy doing the most? Though it might be commonly devalued in American culture, doing things that are fun or bring joy are an important part of maintaining our sense of self. Setting boundaries such that you can prioritize these activities can help you stay connected to yourself and can increase your ability to do the other things. How do you want to describe yourself? Articulating how you would describe your ideal self can be a great way to reconnect with your values and your priorities. Determining if this description is currently accurate will also help reveal where you might want to work on your boundaries. For example, if you want to describe yourself as confident, but find it challenging to say no to requests from your parents, setting healthier boundaries with your parents would be of benefit. So, in assessing priorities, let's take a moment to reflect on these questions and try to answer them to the best of your ability. So there's a lot of opportunities within this module of the workshops to do journaling. These are not easy questions to answer, so don't worry if you need to leave them for later. So, what are the meaningful areas in your life in order of importance? Who are the most important people in your life? What do you enjoy doing the most? How do you want to describe yourself? So this next part of this module is exploring barriers that may be keeping you from setting boundaries. As we gain clarity about what our boundaries are or what we want them to be, it's helpful to also gain clarity about why we haven't implemented them already. In other words, what is it that's keeping us from saying no and meaning it, or standing behind the expectations that we set? Everyone will likely have barriers that are specific to them and their situation, but some barriers are common among most of us who are struggling to set boundaries. Let's talk about a few of the typical obstacles we might need to overcome. Awareness. For most of us, one of the main reasons we haven't set boundaries yet is that we weren't aware we needed them. Similarly, we might be unaware that we are the ones who need to make the changes. That is, often when we encounter a space where we need to set a boundary, it feels like it's the other person who needs to change. It might not be clear that the remedy to a strained relationship is actually within our control. Checking in with ourselves and our feelings so that we can notice the telltale signs of a needed boundary can help us overcome this barrier. So fear of discomfort may be a barrier. Setting boundaries is uncomfortable, and it's the fear of this discomfort that compels many of us to just forego setting boundaries. The idea of upsetting someone we care about can feel so overwhelmingly icky that we choose internal conflict over potential external conflict. We will be talking more about dealing with discomfort, but the take-home message is that we will just have to face it and it will be okay. So with fear of disconnection, just as we fear the discomfort that comes from setting a boundary, we also commonly fear potential damage that could result from our boundaries. The idea that someone might get angry and cut us out of their life is awful and more than enough to make us not want to do it. However, it's important that we remember that setting boundaries actually improves healthy relationships. If someone wants to end the relationship with us because we've decided not to stand for poor treatment anymore, do we really want that person in our lives? It's another area of reflection, opportunity for reflection there. So, what's holding you back? Reflect on one or two areas where you have decided you need to set a boundary, for starters. Then consider what might be keeping you from setting them. Remember, there are many reasons we may be reluctant to set boundaries besides the 3 we just described. Deeply consider what barrier you will need to overcome to set those boundaries and write out what it is. Writing out our fears on paper can remove a lot of their power and help us see what we need to do to face them. So in summary of this module 3, we learned that tuning into our feelings and reflecting on our thoughts are great ways to identify where it is that we are lacking a boundary potentially. Our friends may be valuable resources if we're unsure where we need boundaries. And finally, getting clear on our priorities and our barriers are important steps in getting clear on our boundaries. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the chat. Just leave a message below the video. I have 2 slides that are coming that reflect on the resources or references that were used to build this material. It is science-based material. I'm aware that everybody's going to have their own opinions about a lot that came up in the modules based on personal experience. And again, please comment below the video if you want. I'm definitely open to a discussion here. So stay tuned for the references if you want to explore those. You may want to take screenshots. There's still 2 more modules included in this workshop, so keep watch for them on YouTube. They will be posted as I get them ready. Okay, thanks for joining me. Moving on to references here. By the way, I would appreciate if you would like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to have lots more videos coming, not just on boundaries, but other topics related to wellness and addiction recovery. I'm also a Reiki healer and a nutritionist. So, all about wellness. There's the last slide. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in.